All right, welcome everybody to another episode of vBrownBag. This week we have Matt Just from VMware at h1_tech_Matt, and he's going to talk to us about what's new in vRNI. So remember, if you want to get in the conversation, you can use the chat functions in Zoom, or you can also send tweets out to hashtag vBrownBag. I'll be looking at both. Remember that we have channels in Spanish for Latin America. We have a channel dedicated to EMEA, to Brazil, and of course this one for the US. We have episodes scheduled all across the world. I'm your host, Ariel Sanchez, at Ariel Sanchez More. And now I'm going to give control over to Matt so he can give us all the goodies.
Thanks, Ariel. Let me go ahead and share my screen here.
Perfect.
Okay, should be able to see it? Look good?
Mm-hmm.
All right, great. Okay, so as Ariel said, my name is Matt Just. I'm a Senior Technical Marketing Manager with VMware. I specifically focus on VMware vRealize Network Insight and vRealize Network Insight Cloud, which I'll talk a little bit about the two consumption methods that the product is offered. And today what I want to do is go through some of the new things that are that we've been doing with the product and where the product has gone over, well, it's probably almost 5 years now since we actually acquired Arkin, who was the original acquisition for Network Insight, and then that product obviously became vRealize Network Insight. So a lot of things have changed over the years, and a lot of new great integrations have come. So looking forward to discussing those and covering those tonight. I'll touch on keep the slides light, and I know a lot of people like to see live demos and so on. So I'm going to try to do as many live demos as possible within the product, and then be glad to answer any of your questions as we go. So starting off with vRealize Network Insight. So just to kind of give a high level overview, especially for those of you that are new to the product. So vRealize Network Insight is a product that allows us to monitor and manage the full end-to-end visibility within a network. And when I talk about the network, we're talking about encompassing a full 360-degree visibility from the virtual infrastructure to the physical infrastructure, all the way out to the branch, the data center to the branch, or out to the public cloud, and even encompassing things like Kubernetes containers and so on. So very deep visibility and analytics, all in a single pane of glass that is really, really useful, especially for monitoring and troubleshooting within your infrastructure. It's also a great tool because it's really positioned, being a single pane of glass and having visibility into all of these various components and throughout the infrastructures, allows various personas within the organization, such as your network admins, your security admins, your virtual admins, to all have a single tool to say that they can utilize to get access to all of the information they need from in a single pane of glass. So when we talk about this, we focus on, like I said, users at the end branch, or at the end users at the branch office, telco networks, public clouds. I mentioned VMs, containers, microservices, and stitching that all together through, again, a single pane of glass. So when we talk about some of the Network Insight supports as far as the initiatives, so first thing, obviously, when we acquired Arkin, we had deep integration, and we still do have, obviously, deep integration that's continued to grow, and a heavy focus on VMware NSX. So dealing with application security planning and networking monitoring within your NSX infrastructure, doing microsegmentation planning, and so on. Over the years, we've expanded the product to really support that full array of products, not just VMware, but third party also. So, and I'll kind of cover that here in the demo and in some of the slides. But one of the things would be such as VMware SD-WAN by VeloCloud. We've also put in support for containers, so giving network visibility all the way down to the services level within whether it's Kubernetes, vanilla Kubernetes, PKS, or even OpenShift. Really heavy now, VCF, obviously a big topic. Full stack, virtual to physical visibility, utilizing vRealize Network Insight in your VCF environment. And then also the hybrid cloud. So not just focusing, with support for getting into obviously things like VMC on AWS or VMware Cloud on AWS, but jumping in from a hybrid cloud perspective, whether you're running AWS, let's say EC2 or native Azure and so on, being able to have that hybrid cloud visibility from the data center to the public cloud, whether it is VMC or native AWS or native Azure. So when you look at this, we kind of start off, and I'll let this build out. We cover various components and use cases. So we're focusing on three key things: applications, networking, and security. So encompassing all of that again into the product to be able to provide application discovery and monitoring, network end-to-end troubleshooting and traffic and path analytics, latency, network performance, and then from a security perspective, focusing on things like monitoring from a traffic visibility, application modeling, getting into operations and compliance, change audit, and even microsegmentation planning if you're utilizing a product, software-defined networking such as NSX. So when we look at some of the, as I mentioned, going from the branch and the edge, utilizing things like VeloCloud, focusing on the physical network such as switches, routers, load balancers, and firewalls, focusing on also the virtual infrastructure, so software-defined data center, NSX, VCF. I talked, about containers support with Kubernetes, PKS, and OpenShift, and then same thing with public cloud, VMC, AWS, and Azure. Just some of the marketer, but had a really good report that's available on the VMware website under vRealize Network Insight. This is going to be a Forrester report that was done, talking to actual customers that are utilizing the product. It's a full detailed report. If you're interested, there's a link here on the slide. You can download that. But some really interesting numbers that we're seeing coming back from our customers as we're seeing return on investment and so on. So as you can see, 477% return on investment, which is pretty impressive. So next, what I'll do is I'll jump in and talk a little bit about the Network Insight architecture and scaling. So when we look at the architecture for vRealize Network Insight more at a higher level, the key things to focus on here is the product is completely virtualized. So utilizing virtual appliances consists of the platform VMs, which are going to be basically your GUI interface running as a virtual appliance, and then your collector VMs, which are doing your data collection from your various data sources, whether it be again virtual infrastructure, physical infrastructure, or even cloud. So as you can see here, a lot of different logos you'll see that we have integration with. This is constantly growing. We are in a quarterly release cycle, which is really nice because our engineering team has been doing an awesome job on every quarterly release, adding new features, new integrations with third-party vendors, and also with VMware product integrations. So as you can see, they're very vendor agnostic as far as vRealize Network Insight goes. And then also, getting into you can, from the collectors and the platform VMs, we have also some capabilities around, obviously VMware for upgrades and support, especially if you're utilizing vRealize Network Insight Cloud, which is our SaaS offering that I'll touch on here in a bit. So again, talking about the architecture a little bit here when we're talking about vRealize Network Insight on the on-premises version, we're focusing on obviously a platform VM or cluster of platform VMs that could be deployed, which are going to be virtual appliances, and again, collector virtual machines. And you can kind of see some of the access, being it's web-based. We have, just one-way communication from our collector VM, sending all of the data. The collector, the nice thing about the collector is it's taking all of that data, and let me just let this slide build out here, but we're taking all of the data that we collect from all of these various data sources, whether it's vCenter, NSX, physical switches and routers, UCS or HP OneView or OneConnect, VeloCloud, AWS, even getting into collecting NetFlow and SFlow from physical networking devices such as switches, load balancers. All of this data is being pulled into the collector virtual machine appliance and is being aggregated. We're doing deduplication and so on, and basically only sending roughly around 30% of the overall data to the platform VM that is actually displaying, obviously the results of the data collection. So most of the data, whether it's deployed on premises or if it's deployed in the public cloud, the collector being deployed within the customer's environment, within your environment, in your data center, is maintaining all of your data still within the data center and only sending metadata up to the platform VM, especially in the Network Insight Cloud deployment. Whereas, you're not sending any type of critical data up to the public cloud, which has always been a security concern that everyone's had, especially as they've been adopting SaaS services. So when we look at the second consumption model is going to be around vRealize Network Insight Cloud, which is going to be a hosted SaaS offering. And this is actually hosted by VMware. So what you're going to get here is the platform virtual appliance is actually going to be hosted by VMware, which is really nice because this allows us to monitor how this is, how your instance is actually performing, and to be able to do auto scaling on the back end. So as you're spinning up new services or adding new data sources or increasing flows, let's say you have a specific event going on, that kicks off a bunch of additional data. It allows us to really provide additional support from a SaaS offering to be able to allow you to support you to be able to scale on the back end as you're going. Obviously, you can scale on premises also, but it's nice when it's in the Network Insight Cloud services because it's actually being done by VMware and monitored, and it's an automated service on the back end. So when we look at this, very similar model to what we looked at with the on-premises architecture. As I mentioned, the only very difference in this case is the VMware Cloud Services is hosting the upgrades and the support and the Network Insight platform in VMware Cloud Services, and is communicating with the collector virtual appliance that's running inside the data center or various data centers, depending on the size of the footprint that we're monitoring within vRealize Network Insight. So moving in, when we talk a little bit about how secure is the data and network insight service. So this is going to be more focusing, if we're talking dealing with data going from the customer data center through the collector to Network Insight VMware Cloud Services, where the platform would be hosted if you're utilizing vRealize Network Insight Cloud. Let me go ahead and let this slide build all the way out. So as you can see here, as I mentioned, all of the data coming in, infrastructure, IP, machine naming, routing tables, all of that is collected at the collector appliance running inside the data center. And then it is encrypted, data in motion, going up to the public cloud in the SaaS offering, and it is encrypted and stored. And we have various retention models, obviously, where we can store up to 13 months of data. And offer various services in regards to plans, in regards to whether you want to sign up for a 1-year, 2-year, 3-year plan, or even do like an on-demand service, which is popular, especially with customers that are dealing with data center acquisitions, M&As, where they're doing acquiring companies, and then they're looking at the data within that data center that they've acquired, and looking to do kind of like a lift and shift over to their data center. So they'll drop in and do an on-demand utilizing vRealize Network Insight service to actually pull that data and monitor that data and do planning as they're planning their migration, and then monitoring the migration as it's actually occurring. And here, from a data access standpoint, you can see obviously it can be shared. It's customer only. VMware as far as monitoring, the performance, and then obviously third party, no access for in regards to third party into the cloud services. And then lastly, I'll touch on just a little bit before we get into some of the cool stuff on and talk about some of the demo is around the sizing and scaling. So we get a lot of questions around, how can this scale? What's the sizing? And one of the key things to point out when we talk about this is vRealize Network Insight is agentless, which makes it a great product. No agents need to be installed anywhere within the infrastructure, whether it's the virtual infrastructure. We're not putting any agents in the VMs. No agents within, if we're integrating with NSX or physical environments. We're not putting separate appliances out and so on for net flow collection. So this is actually what makes it really nice. So it totally agentless solution. And basically where our agents, what we consider our agents, are all of our integrations with the various vendors, whether it's VMware or third-party vendors. The products that we're integrating with are acting as the agents that are providing vRealize Network Insight with all the data. So from a performance perspective, you get to see some very great performance numbers. Also, depending on where you're deploying, on premises or as a SaaS offering. But as you can see here, when we're looking at some of the scaling from some of our current scaling numbers, we offer a t-shirt sizing depending on the environment. So you can kind of get a feel for when we're looking at how many flows and how many VMs you can do. When you look at doing an extra large brick size, you can scale up to 100,000 virtual machines. And we actually have customers that have even scaled way beyond 100,000 virtual machines. But just from our base documents, you can see 100,000 virtual machines at an XL size, brick size on the platform. And then same thing on the collector. You can see from on a per collector basis, an extra large collector can support up to 20,000 virtual machines or 10 million flows per day at the largest size, or again, depending on the size of the customer's environment, number of VMs, number of flows, we would deploy, obviously the collector and the platforms in accordance to the sizing requirements. So when we're deploying vRealize Network Insight and vRealize Network Insight Cloud, the nice thing is being it is a virtual appliance-based product. It is very easy to deploy and very quick to deploy and easy to deploy. So whether it's an on-premises deployment of vRealize Network Insight, roughly the deployment takes roughly 30 minutes. It's honestly, you spend probably more time downloading the OVAs than you do actually setting it up and deploying. So you're going to deploy the platform OVA. You'll go in, you'll do your setup. You put in, obviously, set up your credentials and your network IP address and so on. You're going to generate a collector, generate the collector shared secret. You'll deploy the OVA collector, and it will pair with the actual OVA platform, and then create that encrypted tunnel between the collector and the platform. And then from there, it's adding data sources. So data sources being, vCenter, NSX, Cisco ACI, you name it, any of the data sources that we support is going to be going through and adding those data sources. And then you start using Network Insight. Pretty simple. The cloud installation actually goes a little bit faster when we're dealing with vRealize Network Insight Cloud. So you can go in and you can request a cloud account. So you just go in and request. You can get a 30-day free trial of vRealize Network Insight Cloud. So you can go in and request a trial, and then that will actually provision, and it's actually going to provision the platform running up in VMware Cloud Services. And then from there, you'll generate your collector shared secret, and then you're going to you'll download the collector OVA, deploy that within your environment, and assign its IP address and so on. And then it will pair to the public cloud or to VMware Cloud Services to the platform. And then again, it's adding the data sources, and you're off to utilizing vRealize Network Insight. So from there, I'll go ahead and I'll jump into our live demo environment and kind of show, some of the real cool stuff that people typically, obviously want to see rather than looking at a bunch of slides. So when you log into the product, one of the things you'll notice if you haven't seen vRealize Network Insight in a while, we've introduced one of the things we've done is added a dark mode. That was been one of the things that a lot of people kept asking for. So as you can see, we have a dark mode. You can come in here and simply toggle that on and off if you like the light mode. But there is the dark mode that is one of the new features that we've added from a usability perspective. Other than that, just to touch on a couple quick things. One of the nice things about the product is it is built around Elasticsearch engine. So similar to Google, I can come in and start typing in and looking for specific things within my infrastructure. If I'm, targeting on a specific data source, or it could be anything. Like I could come in and start typing in Cisco as an example, and it's going to give me a bunch of different first-class citizens here, as you can see, that I can start to search on. So we'll give suggestive searches as you're actually, typing in. That's going to help you out as far as building out a query that you're focusing on for specific type of data. The other thing to call out is, you see over here, we also have the capability, because we are, kind of like a DVR in an essence. You're looking at we're capturing data and holding that data. So depending on what you set your retention to, which is customizable under the settings, you can have, obviously up to 13 months of data within the product today. So you can come in and you can simply come in and look for specific, entities or specific things, queries that you want to look for data. And you can look at, if I want to see something now, if I want to look at it, the last 24 hours, last week, last 30 days, I can specify a specific date and time, or even a between time range. And this comes in very handy, especially if you want to do side-by-side comparisons of what did it look like 30 days ago and what does it look like today. And I'll show some examples of that. The other thing, just to kind of call out really quick, is when we jump into our settings menu, you're going to see various things. You're going to be able to see, obviously, all of the data sources that you're monitoring or that you've had added and that you within your infrastructure. You'll be able to go into data management. This is where I can go in and edit my retention and so on, as far as how long I'm holding events and so on, which is totally customizable. We do support from a event alerting perspective. One of the cool things that we've added, the system events has been growing and growing. In our latest release in 5.2, we've added support for NSXT 3.0, which also added 35 additional events around NSXT, which has been a real popular topic, especially with the 3.0 release and all the new features. So I can actually come in here and type in NSXT, and it's going to show me all of my various NSXT events that the product will alert upon that we're monitoring and so on within the infrastructure. Each one of these can be customized. They can be turned on and off. You can come in and you can adjust them in regards to the criticality that we can, by default we have it critical, but you can change that. You can also go in on any event alerting and do inclusion and exclusion lists. And then you can also enable notifications. So instead of just receiving the notifications locally within the product, you can come in and you can adjust your email frequency that you want to be emailed when the alert occurs, or you can also at the same time end up enabling SNMP traps and sending SNMP traps also when specific alerts come in. So all of this is totally customizable within the product. These are predefined canned alerts. Now, we can also have user-defined alerts. So every user that logs in can have specific alerts that they want to be alerted upon. So data that they look at and they query upon, that they want to know if something changes or if something triggers, and so on. We can see various end users that are looking at or that have created alerts in here, and it's basically focusing on data that they want to be alerted upon specifically. So it's really nice that you can come in and you can basically, within anything within the product that you want to be alerted upon, you can even create your own user-defined alerts. Lastly, just to touch on, so I talked about the various data sources. So as we come into the product, and I mentioned adding data sources after you install the product, you can come in and you can add the various data sources such as vCenter, NSX Manager so this would be NSX for data center, NSX V for vSphere. You're going to see NSXT, VeloCloud, Cisco ASI or ASR and ISRs. If you're going to do like an SD-WAN assessment, or as we call it, pre-SD-WAN assessment, wanting to analyze traffic on your WAN routers, MPLS, and internet, and look at what the what the before and after picture is going to look like if you were to go with a SD-WAN solution like VMware SD-WAN by VeloCloud. Again, public cloud, we're monitoring the vCenters, the NSX managers up in VMC and AWS, native AWS and Azure, our various container support, as you can see from a firewall perspective. Latest version, we support Palo Alto, Checkpoint, Cisco ASA, and Fortinet, which are some of the major players that our customers have requested. From a converged infrastructure, Cisco UCS, HP Virtual Connect, HP OneView, routers and switches, you can see the various models and vendors that we support. So whether it's from Cisco Catalyst to Cisco Nexus, to basically all Arista switches, Brocade, Juniper, Dell, the various Dell models that they offer, even the new Dell OS 10, which is pretty cool. And then even getting into like Brocade. And then we have a generic router switch option also. So this allows you to utilize an SDK that we have, an open SDK that you can run and actually do data collection from any type of router switch that we may not have native support for today, and do data collection from that and pull that into vRealize Network Insight so that that data is included, let's say when you're looking at a VM to VM mapping or a mapping from a data center to the branch. You want to include a specific a router or switch that we do not have native support for today.
That actually dovetails into the first question that we're getting here, which I really think has several levels, or maybe there's like 3 questions in one. So the actual question is from Ken Nelbone: is there a good way for people to test vRNI in a non-prod environment where there may not be much traffic being generated? And he also mentions, well, or even a home lab. And I think probably we could take it through several levels, right? You've probably seen a lot of cases. How do people normally test this, and how do they normally get started, especially when they have to use the generic router? Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so you can, first of all, yeah, you can obviously test it in a home lab. You can test it in a non-production environment, if in the customer environment, if you want to test it in in the lab in the environment. You can absolutely do that. So 2 things. One, you can choose the way that you want to consume the product, whether it's going to be the on-premises model or the cloud, Network Insight Cloud. And if you want to do the on-premises version, you can actually go to our website and you can sign up for a free trial, and you'll actually download the 2 OVAs, the platform and the collector. You'll deploy those within your environment and set those up. And that will actually give you a 60-day free trial of the on-premises version. And that's basically a fully unlocked product. So you can add whatever data sources you may have within your lab, and start looking at the data that you can actually pull from those. Same thing goes for vRealize Network Insight Cloud. If you want to consume from the cloud perspective, you can go on and sign up for the cloud trial. That's going to give you a 30-day trial. Basically, you'll download the collector, deploy it within your lab or your non-prod environment, and you're going to, again, have a 30-day free trial, full access to the product, no limitations as far as what you can do with it. As far as the generic router switch goes, so if I click on the generic router switch, you'll notice one of the things in here is there's the UC SDK to create and upload the device configuration. Sample scripts are available at the VMware GitHub. So if you click on GitHub here, this will actually open up the GitHub webpage. And this is actually going to take you to the SDK right in GitHub and give you all of the examples. And then what we've done is we've started, not only us within VMware, but customers have started adding templates and so on for various routers and switches that they've built out or done collection against from a template perspective. So and we built it so that you can actually share those various data sources on GitHub within the SDK.
That's an awesome answer. Thank you so much.
Yep. So let me bounce back here. And then just to continue touching on some of the things, we do integrate with Cisco ACI. That's been a very popular integration. We've actually seen a lot of traction. One of the nice things is the difference obviously between adding let's say your Cisco Nexus 9Ks as individual switches within the infrastructure. When you're doing Cisco ACI, because the APIC is managing the network fabric, we actually integrate directly with the APIC. And through that integration to the APIC, it eliminates the need of going in and adding in the Nexus switches individually or utilizing the API if you're doing like a bulk add of switches. So through the APIC, we're able to actually learn about the entire fabric and gather all the data that we need to actually show various data within the environment, including paths and so on. I did mention also we do physical flow collection. So if you want to do NetFlow and SFlow collection from physical networking devices, you can absolutely do that and send those to vRealize Network Insight. We have deep integration with Log Insight, info blocks for DNS, F5 big IP load balancers, along with the NSX load balancers. And then from a CMDB perspective, we have integration with ServiceNow, allowing us to take applications that you define within ServiceNow or have defined within ServiceNow, and learning about those and pulling those into vRealize Network Insight to ingest and monitor within the product. So let me jump back to the main screen, and let's there's various approaches obviously that we can take when we're troubleshooting an issue within a network. So a lot of the times the key thing that triggers an issue is an end user is experiencing an issue with an application to say. And at that point, nobody knows if it's the physical network underlay, if it's the virtual network, if it's the physical host, if it's the virtual machine. I mean, obviously there's so many different constructs. There's a firewall rule blocking access and so on. So the beautiful thing about Network Insight is because we're pulling in all of that data from all those various aspects, we can come in and I can say, okay, I have an end user calling in and complaining that they're having an issue with an application. So I can come in, I can click on application, and this is now going to pull me into our application dashboard where I can see all of the various applications that I'm monitoring within my infrastructure. And what I can see here from a high level view is, and we toggle these off, is one, I can see, I can come to this application and we'll focus on this one, the Hive training application. So let's say an end user is having an issue and they say, hey, I'm trying to access, a video in Hive and it's not playing correctly. It's, I'm seeing all types of buffer issues and so on. Can you take a look at that? Now, when we're on the screen here, one of the things you can look at is you can see how many tiers make up your application. You can also look at things like members, how many VMs, how many physical IPs, or even services. So it could be an application where it's running, running VMs and containers inside that application. Now we can also look at all of our applications here that we're monitoring. Each one of the hexagons here is representing a application. I highlight over it, it's showing me obviously the application, the member count, the tier count. And I get detailed data around, if I had dropped any flows, is it unprotected, and so on. Now we can also toggle in and say, okay, show me all applications that have unprotected flows. Now this is part of the integration, obviously, with around VMware NSX. So if we are looking at flows that are occurring within the application, that we see there is no NSX distributed firewall rule associated to that flow, we're going to indicate that there's obviously unprotected flows in that application. So it makes it really easy to find if you've got applications that have unprotected flows, even after you may have implemented something like microsegmentation, zero trust, and new flows spin up over time. you're going to get alerted that there's unprotected flows occurring in that application. We can also come in and say, show me all applications that are talking to the internet. So I can click in and I can see all my applications that have active communication going to the internet, and I can launch in and click on any of those lines to see all of the actual flows coming in and out of from the internet. We can also look at things like show me all my shared services. So any of these applications that have lit up with a green hexagon are now showing me applications sharing services such as Active Directory or DNS within my infrastructure. And then lastly, I can say show me all applications where problems are detected. And this is when we're in, and when I say problems, we're not just talking specifically a VM problem or you know, a vCenter issue. We're talking, you know, looking at the problem from a the virtual infrastructure and the physical infrastructure, and encompassing that, even public cloud or VMC. So if we see any types of issues with any of those elements, depending on, you know, what makes up the application, we're going to indicate that there's an issue within that actual application. Lastly, before I jump into, you know, from a troubleshooting scenario, to call out when we're discovering applications, we have a lot of different ways that we can discover applications. There's a lot, that's, you know, obviously a big challenge. There's a lot of times customers don't know what makes up an application in their data center, where they may have old legacy applications and they're trying to figure that out. Because we're seeing flows 24/7 and all the communication occurring within the infrastructure, we have various ways that we can discover applications, such as utilizing tags. We can utilize ServiceNow integration, as I mentioned. We can utilize naming conventions. We can utilize regex. So if you're into using regular expression, we have a regular expression builder where you can specify a sample VM. You can click on that and you're going to see what the regular expression is, whether you want to look at it on a position or a group basis. And it's going to show you the application name, the VMs, and so on. So you can utilize regular expression if you have a lot of it. That comes in handy, especially where you have a lot of VMs and so on that are in similar naming convention. Lastly, what to call out is machine learning. So we introduced in 5.2, our latest release, machine learning, which is actually allowing us to go in and allowing the product to automatically discover and provide you with recommendations as to what we feel is an application. And this is actually very, very, very accurate. So as you can see here, I can come in and I can select my scope. So I can say I want to look at either all flows in my data center, or I can come in and I can choose an entity, you know, choose various entities, you know, whether it's a VLAN or a vCenter or an overlay such as VXLAN or Geneve. There's a lot of different entities that I can choose, and then I can click submit, and it's going to start looking at, obviously, data or looking at all those flows and start to give you suggestions as to what we see as an application. So you're going to see the application name that, and we build these out. So it always starts off with app, and then we encompass the whether, you know, the virtual machine names that we're seeing. We utilize various names from that to kind of give you an idea as to what we're seeing this as an application. So here you can see the confidence level. So as vRealize Network Insight is utilizing machine learning to discover, obviously, you know, high being highest level of confidence, is going to tell you, you know, if I look at, for instance, this suggested application here, I can see the recommendation of tiers. I can see the recommendation of the virtual machines, how many, and then I can actually expand this and I can see the 2 suggested tiers, the VMs suggested for each tier, and then the names of those virtual machines that should go within those tiers. And then if you wanted to customize this, if I hit save and I want to monitor it, let's say I don't like the name of my application or the suggested name, you can easily customize any of these. The same thing with your tier names. You can modify them, you know, as you see fit. But, you know, the product is going to provide you with the recommendations just based off of what we're pulling from things like the names of the VMs and so on, and the type of traffic that we're monitoring or seeing going between those virtual machines. So let me jump back to applications, and I'll jump into our Hive training application. I mentioned, you know, like from an end user perspective, I get a call saying, you know, that they're having issues with the application. So as this pulls up, what this is going to do is this is going to give me an overview of my application now. So I'm going to see any events that are going on. I'm going to see all my what my incoming traffic looks like, what the change over the last 24 hours has been, what is my outgoing traffic and any change, how many flows do I have within the application, how many flows that we detect with problems, and that being flows that we see that are unprotected from a security perspective, or flows that have degraded over time. So we actually are measuring TCP round trip time within the applications of all the flows. And if we start to see that, let's say a flow is running on average around 100 milliseconds, if that starts to deviate over a period of time, over let's say a 24-hour period of time, within a specified percentage, we're going to alert as that is a degraded flow that can be investigated and looked at. We're also showing GeoIP lookup, so we'll show various countries and the changes as far as access coming in and out from the internet, and then showing you what makes up the application, the VMs, the physical IPs. In this case, and if any VM goes down, we're going to alert upon that. When we look at the actual topology mapping here, we're going to see this is a two-tier application. So I actually have my video tier, and this is a hybrid application. So the front end of my application is just a single VM running in vCenter in my data center. The back end of my application, as you can see here, is running in AWS EC2. So that it's just my storage tier. So I've got communication back and forth between my tiers. And then I have encompassed other entities such as my shared virtual services. So these are, Active Directory DNS, shared physical resources. Others is going to be things like other applications that this application may be communicating with. So I can see all flows from the tiers going to those. And then what you can see also is not only just flows going to the internet, but I can also bring in, if I want to see, looking at from a branch perspective, I can say, okay, well, here's my Rotterdam branch, here's my Detroit branch. These are end users at these branches that are utilizing this application. As I zoom in, you're actually going to get more and more detailed information. You're going to see all the various end users and any end users with active flows. So you'll see these are just, these could be people sitting on their MacBook connected to Wi-Fi at the branch or Ethernet, and they're accessing this application. So let me zoom back out. And over here, what we can do is we can look at, so right now, I'm looking at all flows occurring within the application. I can also come in and say, show me all unprotected flows. So now any red line here is showing me flows that are unprotected. And this is the unprotected flows portion is an integration with NSX, whereas if we don't see any NSX distributed firewall rule that is associated to the flow, then we're going to mark it as unprotected to let you know that you should take a look at that from a microsegmentation planning or adding a security policy to that flow. The other thing that we can do is we can say, show me degraded flows. So again, I mentioned degraded flows is when we're looking at the TCP round trip time. So I can come in and, for instance, I can click on the flow line between my video tier and others, and I'm going to see all of my communication to my various endpoints, video to others, others to video, unprotected flows, and then I'm going to see my degraded flows. And if I click on my degraded flow, I'm going to see here from my service endpoint, I've got one flow that we've detected, and we can see the max average of the TCP round trip time deviation was 787.1 milliseconds, whereas the typical max average of the round trip time is deep change. It was around 241.2%. So this obviously this flow has majorly degraded, and I can launch into the flow and then start doing some troubleshooting around what may be causing that flow to degrade. Now going back to all flows, again, within our application view, I can scroll down and show, obviously we're monitoring all events that are occurring within this application. The application member managers, such as the vCenter that's managing the front end, the AWS account on the back end. We're looking at things like what's new. So if we see, your incoming and outgoing traffic, any type of analytical events, external services accessed within the last 24 hours, application ports used in the last 24 hours. So you can see the various application ports. the associated number of flows, and then the sum of the total traffic. And any of these you can click on and start doing deep dives and looking at the flows. We can look at various metrics around, the performance. So I can see my Hive video server. I can see from a throughput perspective on the front end how that's performing over time. If there was Kubernetes or containers in this application, we would see that also. We're also going to be able to see things like top talkers by flows in the last 24 hours. So we can see, VMs of end user or VMs for specific IPs such as end users, the associated number of flows, and how much traffic we're seeing between those two. We're also looking at top application flows by rule. So this is going to be the firewall rule in regards to if NSX is in play. So we can see right here, this has just got the default rules on the NSX distributed firewalls, and we can see the count of flows and the total traffic. And then we also include the capability of doing microsegmentation planning right within the application. So you can come in, you can see the various tiers. Again, I can focus on my video tier. I can hit keep focus, and I can see all of my outgoing, incoming, and bidirectional traffic that is occurring from my video tier to my branches, to my storage tier, to the internet. And I can click on any one of these and look at specific flows, if I wanted to, or I can just simply click on the tier itself. And this is now going to open up, and it's going to show me all flows going to all tiers, including things like the internet, shared virtual, and so on. So we can see all of the count of flows, the external services accessed. But more importantly, we get this recommended firewall rules. So if you want to do any type of firewall rules, whether it's in an NSX distributed firewall or even a physical firewall, you're going to see a recommended firewall rule option where we're going to show you what the source, the destination, the service that we're seeing, the protocol, the recommended, and we take a whitelisting approach. So we're whitelisting because we're monitoring all flows that we're seeing currently in the application. So there is some security forensics that needs to take place when you're looking at this to determine and say, hey, I'm just going to pick on DNS here, that this port looks mischievous and something that I may not want to allow. I may want to deny that, so I can go over here and uncheck that before I export my rules and import those into, like, let's say the NSX distributed firewall, or if I'm going to use them for a physical firewall. The other nice thing is if I expand on this, I can also see on this suggested rule, I can see also the related flows, and then I can see if NSX is being used in the environment. I can see the matching firewall rules that we are seeing that are currently there that are associated to this flow. Now that, by default, when you install NSX, there's going to be that default rule that's the allow or any allow all. So that's what we're seeing here, and we would consider this unprotected flow because obviously we haven't implemented a rule yet. It's just allowing all traffic. So as we implement microsegmentation and security, we would start to see the rules that are applied specifically touching these flows. So let me bounce back to the application. Now I can take a look at this. Now, one of the things you'll notice also is I've got these little red circles that are appearing. So these are telling me that I've got issues within the application. You also see we have the physical network represented here. Now the virtual or the video tier on the front end of my application in vCenter is obviously traversing some type of physical underlay that I can look at also. So in this case, I see that I've got an alert on my physical underlay. So I can click on this alert. And what this is going to do is it's now going to open up and it's going to show me that on this switch, which is it happens to be a Dell S5248 switch, you're going to see the vendor, the manager, the model. You're going to see the number of ports. And then as I expand upon this, you're going to see things like the switch port table. You're going to get the port keys, the operational status, what VLANs are allowed to traverse each Ethernet port. What is the MTU configuration on that Ethernet port? What is its speed, its duplex? All of this is read-only information, so nobody can go in and change anything. But what you're doing is you're getting that, again, from a single pane of glass view. It helps to be able to, depending on who's troubleshooting the issue, to be able to see and look at this type of data as we're analyzing the issue. Now, I can see down here that we have a switch port buffer threshold exceeded event. When I look at this and I expand upon this event, I can see here that on this switch, I'm getting a message telling me that on Ethernet 1129, the metric interface peak buffer utilization is at 19.5 meg, exceeds the threshold value of 9.5 meg, so it's triggering this alert. And we're going to give recommendations, obviously, as to what you can start looking at that may be causing this buffer threshold to be triggered. So from here, based on this alert, I can simply click on Ethernet 1129, and now this is now going to open up and take me to the exact time and date that the alert occurred. So I can look at and see, what events have occurred specifically, and what, the event we just looked at. We can see the configurations, what the configuration status was of that Ethernet port when that alert came in. So we can see it was enabled, the admin status up. We can see what VLANs were allowed to traverse that port at that time, the MAC address, the MTU, the interface speed. We get all of the data around this interface, including the switch that it's on. But even more importantly, we can see the peer port. So on my peer port, I can see that this switch interface is connected to an ESX host here on vMNIC3. And we can look at this vice versa too. If we looked at the host, we could physical NIC, we could see which peer port it's connected to on the physical underlay. Which comes in really handy if you're doing troubleshooting. We're also going to be able to see what VMs are connected to that port and traversing that port at the time that the alert took place. So I can see, I've had 6 VMs. And then I can also see specific data, which I'll expand upon this, maximize it. So I can see data that we're pulling from this switch, where I can see my network traffic rate is basically hitting 10 gigs, and that port is only a 10 gig port. I can see the TX rate is running roughly at 10 gigs. The RX side, the receive side, is only at 31 meg. But down here, through streaming telemetry that we're pulling from the Trident chipsets, Broadcom chipsets in the switch, we're actually seeing that the buffer is saturated at 19.5 megs, and we're dropping around 14,000 packets, which obviously would be impacting the performance of the application, which is actually traversing this Ethernet port. So from here, I can go and start looking at, okay, well, which VM is, or what is causing all of this traffic congestion, or if I wanted to, quickly resolve it for the end user, I could go in and simply vMotion the Hive video server VM off of this physical host and move it to a different host where I know there's not port congestion, and then come back and take a look at see what was what's causing the port congestion. So we can take it from obviously multiple approaches. We can also jump to the current time and look at how is it performing at the current time. Obviously, we still have a lot of congestion going on. We still have 6 virtual machines. We can see some of the virtual machines are reporting some issues right now. And then we can also see again, what's the state of this internet or Ethernet interface currently. So if someone made a change and removed some VLANs or added them, we're going to be able to see those differences. So we bounce back. So that's one way, from an application perspective, I can go in and I can pinpoint that down to, let's say, an Ethernet interface. The other thing that I can do is I can come in and let's say that user that contacted me is from the Rotterdam branch. So I can come in and I can do key focus on the Rotterdam branch, and I can see here that I have flows going from the Rotterdam branch to the front end of our application. So I can click on those flows, and it's going to give me a list of all the various service endpoints and the ports and the number of flows associated that are going. So I can see I've got 24 flows from the router branch to the video tier. One of them is considered unprotected. I can filter down on various entities. I can come and say, show me, what has the highest traffic. So I can see here I've got one that's running at 3.1 gig. So we can focus on this. This is going to our Hive video server. So I'll launch into this flow. And this is now going to pull up the flow record and allow us to view the communication that's occurring. And I can see there's someone actually accessing the application right now or trying to. So I can see the data around, throughput and so on from the end user at this IP address at the Rotterdam branch that is connecting into the data center. in Washington to our Hive video server. I get all of my information around source IP, destination port, protocol, what VM they're accessing, what is the VLAN that they're on, what is the VLAN that the VM is on, vCenter constructs such as folders and clusters and so on. I'm also seeing things like applied firewall rules, again, that may be touching this flow if NSX is installed. And then if this user is going across SD-WAN, I'm also seeing the applied SD-WAN policies that are in place. So I can see the two policies, one at the Rotterdam branch, one at the Washington data center, the traffic priority classification, and the link steering that is being utilized on the SD-WAN edges at each one of these locations. I can come in also and add some additional metrics if I wanted to. I could say, hey, show me what the average TCP round trip time is for this user. So as anytime there's active communication, I can actually now add the top line here, which is showing me my average TCP round trip time measurements while this user's accessing or trying to access this application. And then I can even take it a step further and say, I want to see what the path looks like from my end user going to the front end of my application. So now I'm going to open up and see a layer 3 view and a layer 2 view of the multiple hops that this end user is taking from the Rotterdam branch over, in this case, the SD-WAN overlay into our data center. So if I maximize this view, what this is going to do, and we have a legend, with path details that you can enable that's going to give you a hop by hop of everything that you're traversing. But I can see the physical IP of the end user at the Rotterdam branch. I can look at the VLAN that they're connected to behind the VeloCloud edge. So I can see the edge they're connected to, the VLAN, the SVI, the segment. I can see which edge interfaces this VLAN is also provisioned on. I can come in and I can click on the VeloCloud edge that's running at this branch and get detailed information on how it's performing. So I can see it's connected, it's activated, what model edge this is, what software version, what is the primary VeloCloud gateway, the secondary, the super gateway, what is the VCO, what profile, what internet links is it utilizing, KPN on Gig Ethernet 1, and again, more detailed information around any type of analytic events that may be going off, such as right now latency. So if I come and look at this, I can see when I've had latency on my interface exceed a specific threshold, and also if a link is not healthy from an ISP perspective. We were going to get the path that's now going to show us, when we're doing this. This is branch to branch, branch to branch overlay going through a hub. So I can even look at what hub they're going through, the VeloCloud hub, and all the detailed information. Arriving into the Washington data center, the VLAN that that this VM is sitting behind on the VeloCloud edge. I can click on the physical underlay, and I can see the information around the VRF. In this case, we are VRF aware. So I can see this is a Dell S5248, information around the manager, the router, if NAT's configured, information around the routing table in path, and the routing interfaces that are in path, and any type of events on this that may be impacting communication from this VRF, on this physical VRF on this Dell switch going into, let's say, our virtual overlay in NSX. And that you can see here that this is running NSX, so I can look at hop by hop. I can look at the physical NIC. I can get the configuration around the operational and the admin status, what VLANs the physical NIC can traverse, the MAC address, the MTU, the speed, what type of server this is on. It's on a PowerEdge R740. But one of the key things to point out is I can see the peer port, which again is our Ethernet 1129:1. Which is that interface that we looked at that's actually experiencing packet drop due to buffer congestion. And we can see that the name of the switch also here, and we can click in and launch into any one of those entities. And then we go in, we can see it's utilizing VLAN 500. We come up, we hit, in this case, this is using NSX for vSphere, so we can see the ESG configuration. So our virtual edge router connecting to our physical underlay. We can see the its OSPF configuration, or if it was running BGP, the routing table, the routing interfaces, and all of their configuration. We can see the next hop to our distributed logical router, and we can look at that. We can see the VXLANs, and then as we come up and we're coming to the front end of our application, I can click on the distributed firewall. I can see any firewall rules that are configured in path from the end user to the virtual machine to determine if I have any security firewall rules that might be impacting access to that virtual machine. And then again, as we arrive at the front end of our application, which is our Hive video server virtual machine. So pretty powerful on being able to map through various constructs. And I know we're getting short on time, so the last thing I'll pull up here really quick is, I talk about paths. When we can support paths from, not just VMware, but from any third-party vendors and so on. So in this case, this path here actually happens to be from that same application, but this is showing from the front end of the application communicating to the back end running in AWS. So I can see that Hive video server. I can see it going through the NSX components, through our physical underlay, utilizing SD-WAN to jump over to a hub site, which is at another data center. Going through, we're utilizing NSX in that data center, and we actually have a virtual router with a IPsec VPN tunnel that is terminating the AWS session for the VPC. So we can see the VPN gateway, we can see the VPN connection, we can look at those. And then we can see it as it comes up into AWS EC2. We can look at the virtual private gateway that it's terminating on, get the detailed information there, and even look at the AWS firewall rules in EC2 that are configured in the path from source to destination, and want to look at those and make sure that they're not impacting that path. Again, as I scroll through some of these paths, you can see, going from a non-NSX environment into like an NSXT environment, traversing things like an F5 load balancer, a Palo Alto physical firewall. So we can see here, Palo Alto PA3220. I get all the information, the routing table, the routing interfaces in path, and even the firewall rules configured on that physical firewall that are in path from source to destination. We look at, also we can look at things from an F5 perspective. So I can see here that, between these two virtual machines, when I come out of one physical host and go to the first hop, I'm hitting, in this case, an Arista 7050. So this is coming into this Arista switch. I can see the routing table, the interfaces, and so on, and the configuration. I can see then it goes through our Palo Alto firewall, and then the next hop is going to be an F5 load balancer. So when I click on this, it's going to show me all the details around the F5 load balancer. I can see this is an i5800, the routing table and path, the routing interfaces, and all their status. But if I come in and I choose a VIP, so if I change and I want to add, see from a load balancing perspective, it's now going to redraw this path, and it's now going to not only include the F5 routing components that I just showed you, it's actually going to include now the load balancing components. So here's the routing components that we looked at for that VRF. But if I click on the load balancer, I can now see the VIP, I can see the service port, the load balancer type. It's running a performance HTTP. It's using round robin, and I can see my pool numbers here. I can see the port, the VM, that these are VMs. We'll show if they're VMs or physical entities. The status, the application node name or IP. So this is Web 01, Web 02, and then I can simply click View Path, and it's now going to redraw the path, showing it going to Web 02 or Web 01. So we can actually see all of the load balancing components, both in F5 and NSX load balancers.
I just want to say that if I was an enterprise network admin, this level of visibility across solutions is amazing. And probably they don't have, this could even serve as documentation, right? Because I don't think anybody has this level of detail for every app that they have.
No, and that's the big, that's the thing that sets Network Insight apart from competitive products is we're, you know, one of the products that encompasses the virtual infrastructure, the physical infrastructure, and puts it all in one, and supporting a vendor agnostic model, multiple vendors. It doesn't matter if, you know, hop by hop, if it changes from Arista to Cisco to Dell, we're going to be able to model and show out all of the paths, and give you all of the data that you need to understand how a application is communicating. And you know, and an example could be if someone came in on this ACI fabric here, and I came in on my spine, and I made a routing change, and let's say I changed the BGP routing configuration, and it had an impact where now instead of going through X amount of hops to get from source to destination, I'm now increased from, you know, let's say 10 hops to 20 hops. I can now do a side by side comparison at the specific date and time, and because we'll trigger an alert letting you know that there's been a change that occurred. I can look at that when that happened. I can go back to that time, look at it, what it looked like before, what it looked like after, and what changed, and say, okay, well, this routing change that occurred just now increased, you know, additional hops from source to destination, which may be impacting performance, and I can go back if I wanted to and roll back that change. You know, obviously changing that routing configuration.
That's
So
pretty.
yeah, very, very powerful in stitching it all together and providing that single pane of glass for the network admin, the security admin, and the virtual admin.
Yeah. Sorry I interrupted you, but I just thought that it was amazing.
Oh no, no, yeah, it is. It is very powerful. Um, Same thing goes for looking at paths in public cloud. So this is just running strictly in AWS EC2. So it's VM to VM that we're passing, running, you know, this is a full application running in AWS. So I can see the VPC, I can see the firewall, the routers, and so on. We can look at VM communication that are just going over overlay. We also can look at, you know, as I talked about, SD-WAN communication. I can see AWS application, let's say two VMs communicating on the same host in AWS. And as I come further down, we can also look at things like um, communication from a on premises virtual machine communicating up, you know, through a VPN tunnel into, in this case, VMC. So this is actually VMC. So I can see, you know, the firewall configuration on the NSX firewall running in VMC. I can see the NSX tier 1 router here, and as it communicates to our virtual machine running up in VMC on AWS. So as you can see, very powerful on all the various paths that you can actually model out. No matter who the vendor is or what the path is, all of these are dynamically built out as soon as you add the data sources into the product. You do not have to manually build any of these out. You will learn about these paths through the crawling methods that we utilize and discovering the data, and be able to provide this for you. And with that, I'm going to, that's pretty much what I was hoping to kind of demonstrate and cover today on vBrownBag.
Perfect. I only had one more question because, um, when you show that application, I just wanted to get a feel for how difficult it is to build that application. I think I've heard some people say that this solution can help you map some applications. Could you just talk a little bit about that? And that's just selfish for me because I'm interested.
You said as far as help build the application?
So it basically helps you uncover relationships, right? I've heard that vRNI can help you figure out what's talking to what, and that helps you build applications, the application maps or relationships in a bit of an easier way. So
Yeah,
you don't have to demo it particularly. I just want to hear about it, how people use
yeah. So no, you're absolutely correct. So we can absolutely do that. So again, as I mentioned, for a long time, or for, we had different ways where you can kind of come in and add an application manually based off of tags or ServiceNow or naming conventions. But the key thing is utilizing the machine learning, as I mentioned. So this is studying the how or all flows that are occurring between the virtual machines, Kubernetes services, physical, let's say physical database is running on bare metal, analyzing those flows, and then building out a recommendation or providing the application that we detect, the confidence level that we're detecting it, providing a breakout of the tiers, the number of VMs that would make up that application. So as you can see, this long list here, these are just based off of communication occurring in my infrastructure, and it's building out 57 applications that it's recommending, that I can come in and I can say, okay, well, here I've got an application. I want to come in. I want to click, if I click save on this application, and let's just say I save it, it's now going to go through, it saved that application. So I can close this. And now if I come over to applications and we look for the, it was what the app.
You have it there, the third one, FunBike. Second.
It's actually this one here.
Oh, sorry.
It would start with app because it discovers. If I actually click on the app FunBike, then what this is going to do is now open up to that application view and show you the build out. So depending on how much data and what's going on, this is just a 2-tier, but now it's showing me, it's giving me all that model data, the managers and so on, but I can see the 2 tiers for the application. I can zoom in on these. I can see this is the DB tier, so I can see the DB02, the DB01, and over here I can see the other VM that's provisioned for load balancing. This is the DB load balancer, so it's created another tier, and I can see the communication that's occurring. So yes, you can absolutely utilize the product will build out the applications for you utilizing machine learning.
And it does seem that even me, which I'm traditionally a systems engineer, can understand this interface and pretty much build applications by myself. So really cool. Thank you so much for showing that.
Yeah, no problem. And like I said, I really appreciate also you guys having me on the show.
Perfect. I don't have any more questions for you. What I will do right now is I'll stop the recording. And right after that, I'll open up the mics to see if anybody has any questions. But again, thank you so much, Matt. And thank you everybody for seeing this video.